Welcome, advocates, to another episode of the Leading Equity Podcast, a podcast that focuses on supporting educators with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. Today's special guest is Judah Taub. So without further ado, Judah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure is all mine. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence today. But before we get started with today's topic, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
Yeah, so my name's Judah. I run a early stage venture capital firm called Chetz. We invest in early stage startups. We're currently managing $300 million and we're investing in disruptive technologies. I recently wrote a book called How to Move Up When the Only Way is Down. And the idea behind the book is how we can leverage ideas from AI into our own lives, what we as humans can learn from AI so that we make better decisions. This doesn't mean we have to code. It's taking ideas that AI is implementing when it makes decisions so that we, like AI, can learn to make better decisions ourselves.
All right, thank you. And so here's the thing, because in our schools, AI is a thing, because you got some folks on one side, they're like, yo, you should not be utilizing AI, it's cheating. But then on the other side, they're like, kind of like what you're saying. It's like, well, we can take a lot of the ideas that AI is producing, and then we can kind of tweak it and go from there. So it may not be cheating. So I want to start from your end. What is your take on utilizing artificial intelligence in schools?
Amazing. Thank you. So I think there's two answers to that question. There is the easy, relatively superficial answer, which is schools should adopt AI and allow for AI. And I will elaborate on that for a moment. Somewhat similar to maybe many years ago when the calculator was invented. And then years later when Excel came out. There probably were folks who said, don't use Excel. Those folks are probably not teaching anymore today. Tools and technology are going to continue to evolve. They will continue to give us new tools that make us humans more efficient. And then there'll be two types of people. There'll be the folks who adapt to this and then can become more efficient, faster. Before the call, you were telling me how you edit using AI. Yeah, if you want, you can edit this video without using AI. Yeah. If people want to go about writing documents and do everything manually and then try and sort of, rather than print it 10 times, manually write it out again 10 times, go ahead and do that. The world is moving in a certain direction, and we can definitely talk about how schools can adapt to this new world. There is a deeper question, and that is, are there ways that we humans can now think in a more creative way now that we see how AI makes decisions? I'll give an example here. For many, many years, we were programming computers. And the way we were programming computers was, anybody who's done any computing will tell you it starts with if, while, and not. And that is the basics of computers. Why? Because we taught computers to think like humans. We think with if 1 is bigger than 2, or if 1 is smaller than 1. That's how we learned. Right. Today, AI has gotten so much better, and it's coming up with creative ways of problem solving that we humans struggle with. It's the first time in history that we can say, 1 second, maybe we humans can learn a new type of logic because we can see AI is becoming creative. We can see AI is coming up with new ideas that we couldn't. Maybe we can learn, like we taught many years ago, AI human logic. Maybe it's time for us to teach ourselves, humans, AI logic. And AI logic is something that will allow us, whether we're educators or students, to prosper in ways that we didn't imagine.
Okay, I got questions, because here's the thing. Let's bring up the example about me. Like we were talking before we hit record, I was like, yeah, I'm going to edit this utilizing AI that's going to do the editing for me. However, years ago, when I first started, so I've been podcasting for 5 years. And those first years of podcasting, I was manually doing it myself. So I know the mechanics, the basics of how to edit and produce, publish a podcast from start to finish. Yes, now I can utilize AI as a quote unquote faster way to do it. And it's going to be very similar to, but there's still some, it's not perfect. I still have to go back in sometimes and fix a little here and there. There's little parts that might not be perfect. There's some words that get taken out that shouldn't have been taken out. There's little stuff that's there. I think that there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to argue, well, kids need to know the basic mechanics, fundamentals first, then they should utilize AI. So I'm just curious, what is your thoughts on that?
So let's just take that one as an example. When you said the basics and you learned the basics for editing your movies and videos and pictures. So did you learn the basics of how to go into a dark room and take camera footages and let it distill overnight and wait until the morning and dry them? And then, So the basics are changing as well. As technology adapts, the bottom rank of basics is moving up. And you always need to go one step back so that when AI does something weird, you're able to catch it and retrain it. But even what you called the basics was probably the advanced sessions only a few years ago.
Fair enough. That's a good point. And I never thought about it that way, because I was going to hit you with the calculators, because like my daughter's in 9th grade right now and she's taking Algebra 1. And she's like, the teacher said, we can't utilize our calculators in class. They want us to learn the formulas, the equations, all that stuff, and be able to do it manually by hand. So I think you bring up a really good point where it's like basics is where basics is relative to today's time. Is that basically what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and I'll say like some of the basics they say you still probably want a child to know 5 times 5 because you're understanding how multiplication works. But you're not going to spend as long as teaching children how much is 5,497 times 366. You once used to do that. And sometimes they still try and play around with kids to do that. But I would argue kids are better off spending their time learning other probably skills rather than long multiplication.
Okay, so it sounds like you debunked the whole argument that all the kids need to know the foundations. Yeah, they maybe it's so what I'm hearing, I guess, is yes, it's good to understand some of the quote unquote fundamentals, but maybe you don't have to spend as much time because there are other tools and resources that we can utilize that can do those same functions. So having a basic understanding makes sense, but then there's ways that we can progress from what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's fast forward. AI is here. It's happening. Embrace it. It kind of like 10 years from now, who knows where we're going to be at, but like it's a great time to get on board. What are some of the benefits that teachers can implement or utilize when it comes to artificial intelligence in class?
Okay, so there's many, but I will take on one which is a little bit different. And the reason I want to do this is because I think today artificial intelligence is gotten to a stage where it could help us think differently.
Okay.
Not provide us with an answer, because that is something you're seeing a lot today. People just using, whether it's ChatGPT or one of the other ones, they're prompting it, give me the answer. I think slowly where we will start going is to a stage where we will ask ourselves, can we think more creatively like AI does? And I'll give you an example. So when you today Google something, and I'm sure you Google something very frequently, you're typing in Google and you're saying, I don't know, Christmas presents. And I want Google to give me back sort of the top 10 ideas for Christmas presents. Google has to now very, very quickly decide what is going to be the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's a very, very difficult challenge. It's one that in theory could take forever because there's so many different options. Even Google knows it's not able to go in that fraction of a time through every single option and give me back the best ones. It's making guesses along the way, like we humans have to do. When you say, what should I study in school? What should I pursue as a major in college? Even what ice cream should I buy? Okay, Google is making guesses very, very quickly and trying to optimize. And one of the things Google is learning to do today more than ever with AI is take random guesses along the way and not just doing A/B tests, which maybe you teach in school saying, is this option better than this option? Let me try this option. But rather, every so often, it's trying something completely random and throwing it into the A/B testing. Why is the artificial intelligence behind Google doing that? You would have thought that it should just do A is better than B, so let's carry on with A. Let's try a new B. Is A still better than B? That's what we teach today in school. Take two options, keep trading them off until you get to your best option. But Google is doing something completely different. Every couple of A/B testings, the AI has learned to try something completely random. Why is that? And the answer is AI has learned that every so often you need to try something completely random. In my book, I call it an X, a random thought. And in creative thinking, we humans are now learning that AI is not wrong. When we're trying to think about problems creatively, sometimes you need to step back and say, I'm going to try an X, something completely different. We're trying to come up with a new type of ice cream flavor. We're trying to see, what do I want to pursue? Do I want to be a mathematician or do I want to be a doctor? You know what? Let me take a dance class. Every so often in your A/B testing, AI is saying to us, you know what? You need to throw in an X. And I'm using this as one example, but to answer your question, what I think we're going to slowly start learning from AI is not just ChatGPT, give me the answer, or write this essay for me, but ChatGPT or equivalent AI, can you teach me in my own thought process? Are there things I should take into consideration so that I, Judah, or any one of the students in your school can potentially make better decisions and get to a better outcome? And this is a much deeper learning from artificial intelligence. It's not just to do a quick piece of work for me. It's actually making me better, allowing me get to a better result, just like Google does.
I think your Google example makes a lot of sense. One of the things I've noticed when I use Google, for example, it seems like a lot of the answers that I get are relative to my location as well. So like if I type in what are the best books or the best store or whatever, it's going to find that information based off of my geographic location. And I'm going to get those answers. So when you said in a split second or whatever, it's going to give you answers, but it can't give you everything. So when I search versus like, you know how you can do like an incognito tab and you can search that way or you can search the regular way, you're going to get two different results. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, I can give lots of examples, but the broader point is we're at a stage where educators are not only going to have to deal with new technology, but they will actually have the benefit of dealing with new ways of thinking. So I'll give another example. I don't know if you like going to the gym, but fantastic.
I'm glad you could tell that I like to go to the gym, by the way.
Well, I didn't want to make you feel bad or say something. Okay, I'll say that again. You can edit the first part out. As I can see,
thanks for noticing.
As I can see, you like going to the gym.
Yeah. Okay.
Good. In the gym, you got two types of guys. You got the guys who are super muscular and maybe could do one thing in an unbelievable way, like bench press, like huge bench press. But if you give them any other exercise, they're clueless. They can't do anything. And then there's the all-rounders, the folks who like maybe can't bench press as much, maybe they can't sort of do anything as good as the individuals who specialize, but they can float around the gym, etc. And the question is, do you prefer the sort of the muscular guys or the guys who are sort of agile? And it's a trade-off that we have to make in our own lives. Do you do a major and double down and become sort of an absolute expert in one tiny field? Or do you, as a student and an educator, try and create people who have a more worldly, more broad view of things? Actually, AI has some suggestions for this.
Okay.
If you look at the way AI is programming or engineers are programming cutting edge AI, they are now opting for more agile than muscular algorithms.
Okay.
And they're not doing this because they like sort of flexing their so-called sort of algorithms in the gym. They see that over long periods of time, which in algorithms can be sort of a couple of hours, the agile folks outperform the muscular ones. And as an educator, as a principal, I'm sure this is not a surprise. Today, you mentioned to me before the call, you're educating folks who are between the ages of 14 and 22. They are likely to be in the workforce until the age of 60, even 70, who knows? That means, according to the students that you're now teaching, they should be working in 2065, the year 2065. Just imagine what the workforce will be like in 2065. It's nearly impossible to predict. So the people who are going to come and specialize in such an extreme way today, it's highly likely that at some point over the next decade, maybe 2 decades, something will happen, the game will change, and suddenly it's not bench pressing anymore. It's something else. And the agile folks who are pretty good at this and are pretty good at that and are pretty good at this and are pretty good at that, they're able to bounce around. So one day GPT chat comes out, the next day a new type of, editing video software comes along. Afterwards, something else happens. And the folks who have a worldly view, a more broad skill set, are far more likely to find a way to fit into this changing world. So another one of the takeaways from the way we see AI developing for us as individuals and as educators is we're finding that broad base and skill sets are more important than narrow and knowledge-based education.
Okay. So it's not just necessarily the understanding of how to utilize the platform, whatever it is, what's the current trend right now, but just being able to adapt is more on the longevity on side of things. Is that what I'm hearing?
100%. I'll just give another example. So we invest in, as I mentioned, lots of startups. And so I'm on the board of about a dozen startups, and we've invested in about 40 of them. And suddenly COVID hits, and nobody obviously could have predicted COVID.
Right.
And you ask, okay, of the 40 startups, which are the ones that successfully managed to navigate their business throughout COVID? Obviously, some of them, if you're, for example, in digital or telemedicine, digital medicine, it's easier than if you're in travel tech.
Right.
But broadly, the agile ones, the ones who were open-minded, who had a broad skill set, were the ones who succeeded far more than the ones who had the sort of more muscle approach, focused approach, didn't sort of think about changing too much. They know this is what we do, and we're going to succeed anyway. And now, sort of a couple of years after COVID, I look back and I just say one thing: which are the agile startups? Those are the ones that I can see succeeding today. And the ones who were very fixed with their mindset found it very difficult. And in a world that's changing so quickly, I think it's just an obvious calling, and one that AI is pushing us towards, that having a broader skill set and a more agile, flexible mindset seems to be the obvious way to go.
Okay. I want to go back a little bit because you mentioned something that kind of stuck out to me. So I took a little note on it, because typically ChatGPT, for example, is often utilized to give answers. Write me a 500-word essay on such and such, or what is the answer to this? Like, we put in a lot of prompts that are asking AI to give us the answers to. And so I think that's one of the main reasons why a lot of educators, teachers, for example, are like against it. Professors are against it because, you're just giving artificial intelligent essays and scholarship essays and all these different things that are out there. So what are some other uses that we could have for ChatGPT if that's not the direction we want to go in?
Okay, so let me tell you a story. So I've got a dear friend called Takala. He is an amazing guy who moved to Israel about, I think it's 33 or 4 years ago from Ethiopia. He moved to Israel through the Sahara Desert, and he is the first of his entire family to get an education. He became an engineer. And after doing this, he turned around and said, look what an amazing life I have now. I've got an engineer. He said, my first paycheck, I came home and I bought stuff for my family and my brothers, etc. And then he sat down and he said, actually, I don't want to be an engineer. I want to dedicate my life to helping other Ethiopians get a life that I have now achieved. And so for the last, I think it's 20 years roughly, he's been running an organization called Tech Korea that helps Ethiopians move from working in gas stations and those type of jobs to becoming software coders. And he does this within 10 to 12 months. He gets folks who have no background in computing, some of them barely know English, and within 10 to 12 months, he's able to educate them from nothing so that they get jobs in companies like Intel and Mobileye and Facebook, etc. I met with him last week, and it's really incredible how he does this, etc. And I asked him the same question. I said to him, how are you using the likes of AI and GPT, etc. And he said to me, it's unbelievable because now I can train people within 8 to 10 months rather than 10 to 12 months. And now the gap between them and some of the other folks who have full university diplomas has become even smaller. And now the folks that I have who are willing to work much harder and are willing to think into the middle of the night for creative solutions, etc., are actually able to surpass some of the guys or girls who started off with a more privileged background. So one of the things that ChatGPT is doing is it's leveling the playing field. You don't necessarily need anymore so many years to get that first job as a coder, as a software engineer, as a video editor, like you said. These are real opportunities for people. And the world is only going to carry on going this way. So just to give another example, 10, 15 years ago, if you wanted to start your own website, that would have taken you, I don't know, a month of programming. And most folks couldn't write, I don't know, C++ or whatever they had to do to try and build a website. And today, for $10 a month, you can build your own website. It's easy. You don't actually have to program at all. You can just do it. You can drag, drop, build it around. AI is coming along and doing that for tons of different industries. It's just starting. But if you want to be a video editor, if you want to be a front-end engineer, if you want to be a back-end, if you want to be, we're just starting to see this. If you want to be a writer, you can get it to write. Even if you found it difficult at the beginning, you can work long enough to get your ideas on paper. And slowly over time, I think the opportunities are only going to grow. So one of the things that I would argue to educators, like those that you mentioned earlier, is that AI is going to democratize a lot of the skill sets that we have today. It's going to provide a step up for people who don't necessarily have the background, but now within a couple of months, they could be doing things that a couple of years ago were unheard of. They couldn't have dreamt about. I think the challenge for these educators is that a lot of them have syllabuses that they have been teaching for many, many, many years, which they like to do stop, start, play. And AI has come along and said, guys, there actually is a much better education that you could offer your students, but you're going to have to redo some of your syllabus. And you and I both know that that is a painful process for the educators. So I don't think it's so much a question of, is AI good or not for the students? Long term, I think for students, and especially for the less privileged ones, it's phenomenal. The question is, are the educators up for the challenge?
Man, you just hit, listen, that part right there makes you hit it hard, because you're right. We got a lot of educators that's been teaching the same thing, same lesson, same syllabus, same test, same exam, same everything. The class is the exact same for the last 10 years because it's easy. It's easier to do it that way as opposed to recreating the wheel every single semester, every single school year. But I mean, I'm just thinking like you could essentially put your syllabus into a chat GPT and ask it for some help with updating your syllabus to be a little bit more current or more AI friendly. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. It depends how much. I mean, the harder you're willing to work as an educator, the students will probably benefit.
Okay. So a lot of the talk that we've had today, and I'm not sure how your book is framed, but is in the future, in the years from now, 10 years from now, we're going to be here. So what would you say to a teacher that says, well, I'll just wait 5 years, or I'll wait for technology to catch up and then I'll start because right now there's just too much that it's not ready yet. It's not where it needs to be, and it still has a ways to go. How do you respond to an individual that has that kind of language?
It's difficult. I do feel for teachers. You typically, and I don't know how it is in your school, but typically teachers are doing it because they believe in the job and the privilege of teaching others, not because the pay is great, not because the hours are great. So you got to feel for teachers. Having said that, the reality is technology is only accelerating. And the students who adapt to this new and changing world are going to be the ones that can then go off and succeed. And if you as an educator want to see your students thrive, you need to think about how you allow them to prosper in this fast changing world. One of the things I would say is, just like I say to students, I would say the same thing to teachers. Technology is becoming far, far more user friendly than it ever was. If you think about you nodded earlier when I mentioned sort of C++ and building sort of basic websites many years ago. So I'm assuming you've seen or had some type of background here, but these were really horrible for a user to get involved. And I remember from high school, when it was even sort of before that, and sort of Pascal and whatever people were writing code back then. I mean, you really had to be very geeky to even want to look at the screen back then. When you mention sort of GPT, it sounds scary. AI, LLMs, the new GPT-4. But the reality is, for anybody, somebody who doesn't like technology at all, the user interface, the experience is so much more pleasant. And what I would say is something that I think most teachers say to their students, which is play with it. Just like if you are a teacher in music, you literally want the students to go home and just be with the instrument. That way they will improve. I would say the same thing with technology. Like AI and GPT, it's becoming so friendly that even folks who have always felt that technology is not for them and always felt that, I don't know, technology is not their thing, it's always difficult, it gets stuck, etc., I would just play with it. And very quickly you will see, even if it's just the ChatGPT bar, which is very similar to Google. Everyone searches on Google. It's not very different to using that on ChatGPT. And we will start seeing new types of AI, new types of large language modules that will come out. And as long as you're not afraid, as long as you're playing with these things, trying out, spending an hour a week, a couple of minutes a day, you might find that this is not only not scary, but it's actually useful. And it's something that you can integrate into your teaching methods. And it's something that you will become more open-minded to allowing your students to prosper, because I can guarantee that one way or another, your students, your educated students, will come across AI when they meet their first job or just working world. And those who have a more open approach, who have played with this in the past, who've been exposed to this, will just naturally be better positioned than the others.
Do you recommend that higher education, for example, when they're offering teacher prep programs, that they offer an AI, teaching AI or utilizing AI in class? Like usually, like I remember when I was in college and I was going through teacher training, we had just a traditional technology in class type of class. But now I'm just thinking, as I'm talking to you and I'm thinking about the future and we're preparing future teachers, should we offer an artificial intelligence class as part of the courses that we're offering for teacher prep programs?
For sure. Let me give you an example. So I'm guessing that when you became a manager, whether it's a principal or even one stage before that, you had a course in Excel. You had to do a budget. You had to check you had to do this.
Yeah.
Okay. Nobody said to you, no, you're going to do that on a piece of paper with a pen. They gave you a course and said, by the way, when you submit to us your monthly, annual, quarterly reporting, etc., use this tool called Excel. It will make you better. It will eliminate mistakes. And by the way, it would take you less time. It's a win-win-win for everyone. I'm sure you also have a sort of dashboard where you have sort of like some type of portal where you have to enter information, etc. That's also something that didn't exist many years ago. And now most education systems around the world are trying to sort of reskill their teachers. AI is just going to be the next obvious step. If you don't want to use AI, you probably shouldn't be using Excel, just so that you're consistent with your beliefs.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we had to take it. I remember taking statistics, because we had to implement it, check grades, academic performance, how our students are doing. And if I hadn't taken a class like that, then I'd probably be in trouble when it comes to looking at the data for our students and the growth and academic progress of our kids. So, I mean, that's a good point. I'll say this, Judah, I've definitely learned a lot from you just having this conversation in regards to artificial intelligence. It's got me excited with the future. And, I hope that those who are listening to this conversation, especially if you are highly against utilizing artificial intelligence in class, that maybe this will be an opportunity for you to do some further research and kind of look into it a little bit more. I'd love for you to share with our listeners, one final word of advice that you can provide.
Yeah, so the main one that I would say is just don't be afraid. So I started off writing a book on AI and I made it very technical. And then I sent it to a bunch of people and they said, you know what would be a real challenge? Like write the book with all the insights that you have, but now sort of do it again, but without anything technical. Stories after stories after stories with small bottom lines of what you can learn for each of these from AI. And it was a challenge, but that's what I did ultimately. And it took a lot longer, but I'm so pleased with it because now it means that people who have absolutely no background can use this to get a first exposure into how AI even thinks. And it's through stories. And my advice to anybody is not to be afraid, to feel like they can play around with AI. It's becoming more accessible. And I really think it's something that could help level the playing field in a very significant way.
I love that you keep referring to it leveling the playing field because, like you said, there are people that are at advantage. And a lot of the stuff that I talk about in my show is about how do we make sure that students that do not have that access to all of the bells and whistles and parents who've had PhDs and doctorates or whatever kind of things, like how do we make sure that they have the same opportunities as everyone else does? And I think you bring up a really good point that artificial intelligence is a way to help level that playing field. So thank you so much for all this information. If we have some folks that want to connect with you, what's the best way to reach you online?
There's a website, so judahtaub.com.
judahtaub.com. So once again, I am speaking to Judah, author of How to Move Up When the Only Way is Down. Judah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.